more detail later in the show, but we have talked a little bit about the drought and, of course, the idea that one of the solutions is to ban those disposable barbecues. Keith in Felton. Keith, what do you want to tell me? Good morning.
Hi, Nick. I just thought I'll find it interesting. You've got some people like Emma earlier explaining how bad the drought is.
Yeah.
A little bit earlier, you had somebody talking about how small our vegetables are going to be.
How small our vegetables are going to be? Was that on my show?
Potatoes.
Oh, right. They won't get as big. Okay, got it. Right, sir.
Yeah. And so places like everybody's blaming the private citizens because we're using our water to fill up pools and things like that. But you've got companies like, I went to Felton to go and get breakfast at McDonald's, and there's the chap busy washing down the parking with a jet hose. I was there for half an hour. He even asked me to move my car while I was waiting on the line for you. And he only done a quarter of the parking. So it's going to take him 2 hours of a hose pipe running solidly. But companies like that, they don't care because it's under business rules or something like that, which is different.
Yeah. What do you think should happen in those instances, Keith?
They should be fined so badly, it's unbelievable.
That's as the drought starts. Almost certainly we will have that drought alert later today. Keith, thank you for your story. We're talking in more detail about the drought later in the show. Let's come back, though, to the conversation concerning the energy crisis or the cost of living crisis. And as we started the show, we looked at one of the front pages, the Daily Telegraph, and I remind you that is very much a Conservative supporting newspaper. And there's a picture of the politician who's the leading contender to be the next leader, and in turn the Prime Minister. I speak of Liz Truss, taken at Cheltenham at the Hustings last night. At the headline, Truss, no windfall tax on energy companies. Why? Well, unfortunately we don't have Liz Truss, but we have one of her prominent supporters, who is Conservative MP and Work and Pension Secretary, Dr. Thérèse Coffey, who joins me now. I don't need to remind you, I'm sure, Doctor, that we have these companies that are making, in some instances, £9.5 billion profit. They are paying, in some instances, their chief executives £11.5 million per annum. Why can't we have a bit more cash off them? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. We already have a windfall tax in place. I think there was speculation during the week about whether we increase or change that. And I know that Liz's approach is about making sure that we get value for money. And it's important that we do that by getting investment in what's needed. And elements of this was about achieving net zero in the future. But of course, it's about not having unfair profiteering. That's why we have regulators. It's why we have the Competition and Markets Authority as well. So I think some of the windfall tax is already in place, and I'm conscious that we need to continue to make sure that we help people, which we're already doing through a package of support, and indeed government is working up considerations across the during this summer recess.
Do you honestly think you're doing enough?
Well, I'm conscious that we put in place a package worth about £15 billion. My own department, we gave the first part of the cost of living payment that we legislated for last month, and indeed more money is coming to every household next month. I think it's fair to say, is consideration being given to other support mechanisms or increasing support mechanisms? That's what government is considering, but indeed we have to also get the confirmation from Ofgem about what that's likely to be, and those elements will be considered in the round towards the end of this month, and indeed with a new Prime Minister in just a few weeks' time.
You talk about a new Prime Minister. Perhaps I can share with you research or news put out by a former Prime Minister. The Tony Blair Institute for Global Change has said Liz Truss's plans to reverse the increase in national insurance would save households on the lowest income 76 pence a month. The candidate you favour, she doesn't get her sums right, does she?
She absolutely does, and this is thinking about an average of £170 for working households is my understanding. However, the important thing, I think, in the approach that Liz takes in her economic plan, we've heard this morning that the economy has contracted, and we don't, understandably, we want it to grow. Sadly, the Bank of England forecast is for a deeper recession than perhaps government would like, and that's why Liz wants to set out more of an approach about how we get that growth and also put more money into the pockets of people straight away by reducing things like the national insurance levy. But and indeed, it's considerably more than that for the average working household, as you will well know.
No, here we are.
Nick.
So the better households will be better off. The richer households, will be better off by some £93 a month. So this is a classic Conservative policy, isn't it? You're looking after those who are well off, £93 a month. Down at the bottom end of the scale, 76 pence a month, according to calculations.
Far from it, Nick, because
from the Tony
what's
Blair
also
Institute.
happened under a Conservative government is that we've increased the national insurance threshold. So there are fewer people paying national insurance than there were before. So, frankly, Tony Blair has got nothing to shout about in helping the poor during the financial crisis that happened under Gordon Brown's watch, not helped by Tony Blair's legacy. No extra support was given to people on very low incomes, far from it. And in fact, this government has stepped up and helped households. That's why that package of support is already in place. Some of it has been delivered. There is more to come to households. I think what is fair is that to say is that Ofgem, with changing the price cap, and a regulator-independent government making that decision to move to quarterly changes, government is now actively considering, but of course it will be for the future Prime Minister in less than a month to look at the options and consider what levers to pull in order to help people, including struggling households, but also, importantly, to get on with an agenda of growing the economy, not managing decline.
But if I were to take you to France, you may be aware EDF energy customers in that country we are paying almost 2.5 times as people do in France after Emmanuel Macron has put a strict cap on price rises. Without blitzing you with too many figures, Secretary of State, you may be aware EDF customers in Britain, their bills are capped at 1,971. In France, courtesy of Monsieur Macron, their bills are capped at €950, £803. Why does Liz Truss not do the same?
Well, there's two different approaches. I'm not the Energy Secretary, but I recognise that I represent constituents. And we have a state-owned energy company that, by the way, is suing the French government for the £7 billion change in loss that it will make. But nevertheless, that's been put in place by the French government to, by the way, have far more of their electricity coming from nuclear energy. Now, in the UK, we have the highest proportion of gas being used to fuel homes. That brings a global price, and that's the part of the challenge that we have right now. I mean, German customers are facing higher bills than we have, so it's a different energy structure that's in place. But going forward, we do need to make sure that we're investing more in things like nuclear power plants. This government has given planning permission to at least 2 new in the last few years, but there are other ways that we can also try to make sure we have that energy security and resilience. So trying to compare French prices and UK prices is not comparable in terms of the different costs of energy that go into our households.
Can I lastly just touch on the drought with you, reminding my listeners, of course, you served as Environment Minister some years ago, and the last drought was in 2018, when I think you were in post as Environment Minister. If we hear that much of England, if indeed all of England, does declare a drought, what does that mean for my listeners? What are they meant to do? And again, what action should the water companies be taking?
Well, this isn't going to be going back like to the 70s where there were standpipes around the country when we had similar sort of temperatures. Indeed, since the private investment went into the water industry, we've seen a lot more improvements to things like leakages and similar. We need to continue to that focus, but overall I think it's about people being careful with water.
Improvements
I
to
represent
leakages,
Suffolk.
Secretary of State. I think a lot of people would find that extraordinary. It's 2.4 billion litres a day. That's 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools a day. You call that improvements? I call that catastrophic.
It's improvement from where it was. It's improvement from where it was, Nick. And they've been set fresh targets as well to continue to invest to reduce those leakages. Of course, it is challenging. I'm not doubting that. But compared to where we were just a few decades ago when we were similar to 1976 in terms of ongoing temperatures. But being a Suffolk MP, I'm very conscious of the impact on things like agriculture as well. That's why we need to make it easier for reservoirs to be built, whether that's the big reservoirs or indeed the smaller reservoirs that can be used to store rain when it comes in the winter, and much easier to deploy in the summer when it's much more needed. So it's changes to infrastructure like that, and indeed getting rid of some of our EU regulations that's holding back private sector investment for those long-term infrastructure. That's the sort of thing which Liz Truss wants to accelerate in order to make sure that we can unlock money now and get improve our chances of growth, but also improve our infrastructure for the longer term.
And finally, a yes or no if you can. Some campaigners say those disposable barbecues, typically you can pick them up at petrol stations, they have a tray of charcoal, you light it, and then they should actually be banned because there's a real risk of them causing some serious fires with such a dried out countryside. Would you ban disposable barbecues?
Personally, I wouldn't be banning them. I know that retailers have removed some of them from their sales right now. I think it's about people being responsible in how they use these different facilities. But nevertheless, of course, everybody needs to be very careful, recognising just one match can actually trigger a huge fire. And that is important that people take care when they, especially in the countryside, but also, of course, we're seeing more, unfortunately, in urban areas as well.
Grateful for your time today. Thank you, Secretary of State Dr. Thérèse Coffey, who's Work and Pension Secretary, appearing here on LBC 1 minute after 8. Let's get the news.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.